Picher, Oklahoma was once a thriving mining town, known for its abundant lead and zinc production. In fact, during the World Wars, it became a vital center for mining, supplying the nation for the metals necessary for the war. However, behind the facade of success and growth, some problems would eventually turn Picher into a much different, much worse, toxic place. That's right, these days, Picher is a toxic ghost town, virtually deserted, marked only by contamination and devastation. So how could something like this even happen? How could such a prosperous city fall into a complete state of ruin? Stay tuned to find out, as today we discover the history of Picher, Oklahoma. I'm your host Ryan Sokesh, and you're watching It's History. Picher is located in the northeastern tip of Oklahoma, right on the border between Oklahoma and Kansas, within the boundaries of Ottawa County. Anyhow, the city emerged in 1913 when geologist George O'Berryman discovered rich lead and zinc deposits on the property of Harry Crawfish. These metals were essential for various industries, especially during the World Wars, when their demand increased exponentially. In fact, the Tri-State Mining District became one of the world's largest producers of these minerals. For reference, the Tri-State Mining District covers approximately 2,500 square miles and is located in southeastern Kansas, southwestern Missouri, and northeastern Oklahoma. Lead and zinc mining in this region began around 1859 and continued all the way up until 1970. At that time, lead was essential for producing bullets and shells. Additionally, it was also used in cable sheathing and battery manufacturing, which are both crucial elements for the operation of communication equipment and military vehicles. On one hand, zinc was primarily used in the galvanization process to protect steel from corrosion and extend its durability. This process was fundamental for creating durable military equipment, including armored vehicles, airplanes, and various metal structures. It's even been said that more than half the lead and zinc used in World War I came from Picher. With that in mind, an urban center formed around the new excavation center practically overnight. The town was named in honor of O.S. Picher, the owner of the Picher Lead Company. Oliver H. Picher and William Henry Picher established this company in Joplin back in 1875. Native to Madison, Indiana, and graduates of Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois, the brothers arrived in Jasper County, Missouri after the Civil War, drawn by opportunities in the mining industry. The original company was reorganized several times as Picher Lead and Zinc Company in 1876 to 1877, and then as the Picher Lead Company in 1889. By the mid-1880s, the Picher brothers controlled approximately 1,200 acres of mineral-rich land. Then, their influence in the smelting industry grew significantly in 1886, when they acquired the Lone Elm Mining Company from A.E. Moffitt. This move gave the brothers a competitive advantage as they gained exclusive rights to produce white lead from smelter exhaust gases. The acquisition was vital, as it gave them control over one of only 3 smelting operations in southwestern Missouri. In the years to follow, they expanded to mineral areas of Galena, Kansas, and Webb City, Missouri. So by the time they bought the Webb City smelter, the Pichers dominated the smelting industry in Joplin and consolidated their operations around Webb City. The town quickly developed to accommodate the miners and their families. From there, underground mines and mineral processing plants expanded, attracting workers from various places. Just 2 years later, the population had grown to over 9,000 inhabitants. The city's infrastructure improved by constructing roads, public services, and public buildings. Houses were built for employees and their families. Churches and schools were also established, while local businesses such as stores, restaurants, and services emerged to meet the community's needs. In other words, the city was thriving. However, over time, the inherent challenges of mining began to surface, foreshadowing the problems that would eventually lead to the city's decline. During the 1920s and 30s, Picher continued to expand. Mining techniques improved and lead and zinc production reached new levels. At its peak, in 1926, when mining was at its highest level, the population of Picher reached an astounding 14,252 people. At that time, Ottawa County was the world's largest source of lead and zinc. Between 1908 and 1930, the miners in the area produced over $222 million in zinc and $88 million in lead. This included more than 50% of the zinc and 45% of the lead needed during World War I. But wait, it gets better. After 1915, more than 90% of the district's minerals came from Picher deposits alone, and hence mining companies provided stable employment and good wages, attracting more and more people to the city. Meaning, at least in a sense, Picher was a pillar of the American mining industry. But things were not easy. Miners worked hard under challenging conditions. Their workdays lasted from 10 to 12 hours, and in that time, they were using heavy, dangerous manual tools in very claustrophobic spaces, as generally speaking, mine shafts and slopes measured about 6 feet wide to 5.5 or 6 feet high, meaning the taller of the men had to constantly crouch. However, main access shafts were larger, ranging from 5 to 8 feet. And I have to point out that, rather horrifically, 12-year-old boys often worked alongside older men. This was helpful due to the confined spaces. Many areas of the mine were too small for adults to move around, and since child labor regulations were not established until 1914, these massive mining corporations sent children into places that adults could not access. Additionally, they faced daily risks, including collapse, explosions, and exposure to toxic dust. Most mines used the room and pillar system, with large rooms excavated alongside the main shaft, leaving thick pillars to support the roofs. These rooms typically measured between 155 and 187 feet long and about 25 to 30 feet wide. After decades of intense extraction, the lead and zinc reserves began to deplete, making mining in the region less profitable or sustainable in the long term. And by the late 1960s, things got much worse. A combination of factors. You see, Picher not only faced depletion challenges, but a change in market demand, rising operational cost, environmental and regulatory impacts, workforce displacement, and international competition. Together, these elements made mining in Picher unsustainable, leading to the closure of most mines. The city began depopulating as its primary economic support deteriorated, and miners found work elsewhere. Those who remained in the district turned to agricultural, livestock, and tourism, but it probably would have been better if they left as well. Because by the 1970s, the effects of contamination became blatantly evident. Studies revealed alarmingly high levels of lead in the soil and groundwater. The local community started to notice increased health problems, especially among children. It was bad. Experts noted that miners extracting lead and zinc ore were much more prone to things like tuberculosis, lung cancer, and even liver failure. Mining waste was accumulated in enormous piles around the city. It was estimated that there were 178 million tons of this waste, mill sand and sludge in about 30 piles scattered about. According to the CDC, lead exposure can cause brain and nerve system damage, stunted growth and development, not to mention hearing and speech issues in children. Unaware of these dangers, families allowed their children to ride bikes or play in these waste piles. According to some sources, they were treated as gigantic sandboxes. So as you might imagine, the effects were horrific. In 1979, the situation reached a critical point when acidic water began to flow from the abandoned mines into Tar Creek, which is a nearby stream that impacts the water system of the entire area. This highly contaminated water flow affected the area's flora and fauna, meaning the region's drinking water was contaminated. With that in mind, by 1983, the EPA designated Picher and Tar Creek as a Superfund site, a category reserved for the most contaminated places in the United States that require intensive cleanup. The site covers 40 square miles and includes many towns beyond Picher. But to be fair, the entire area is a mess, as this is just one of 4 subsites within the Tri-State Mining District, covering 2,500 square miles, extending well into southeastern Kansas and southwestern Missouri. Despite cleanup efforts such as removing mining waste, stabilizing the soil, and treating contaminated water, the magnitude of the problem was just overwhelming. Actually, the contamination was so bad that temporary solutions were insufficient. Much of the plant and animal life in Tar Creek was outright destroyed. The town was so far beyond recovery that the only solution was relocating residents. Unfortunately, however, not everyone agreed to leave. Many residents felt that the compensation offered by the government was too low to start a new life elsewhere. Relocating also meant leaving behind not only their homes, but their community, history, and identity. Needless to say, for those who decided to stay in Picher, life became increasingly difficult. The report indicated that 35 collapses had occurred in the area since the last inventory taken by the Oklahoma Geological Survey in 1982. With this new evidence, U.S. Senator Jim Inhofe called for a property buyout for all residents willing to move and escape the danger. More than 200 families relocated over the next 2 years thanks to the federal government funds. The evacuation of Picher began slowly, but as health risks became more apparent, the need to leave the city became undeniable. As the population further decreased, Picher's public services and infrastructure deteriorated rapidly. Schools closed, municipal services were reduced, with shops and restaurants being shuttered. Public buildings like the town hall and churches were outright abandoned and quickly began to show signs of urban decay due to the lack of maintenance. Picher's once lively streets turned into desolate and poorly maintained roads. Essential services such as water and electricity became intermittent, making life even more difficult for the few remaining residents. And by the 1990s, a new danger appeared: sinkholes, as the abandoned underground mines below began to collapse. A 2006 federal study showed that 159 homes, businesses, and public buildings in Picher were at risk for collapsing due to significant undermining. However, despite the signs of decay, residents were unprepared for the magnitude of the disaster that would soon strike with devastating force, pushing the city to the point of no return. On May the 11th, 2008, an EF4 tornado devastated the southern half of Picher, causing the deaths of 7 people and injuring many more. The extent of the tornado's damage was not revealed to the public until several days later, as police and patrols had erected barricades around much of the city. The storm almost destroyed the southern half of the town. John Sparkman, director of the Picher Housing Authority, stated that 295 houses were destroyed, based on comparisons between aerial photographs taken before the storm and ground observations. Victims claimed that after this event, quote, Picher had disappeared. Even before the federal buyout program, approximately 1,000 people lived in the town. Since the program began, over 200 houses were demolished, a fact that, in the context of the tornado, many people celebrated, since the death toll could have been much higher otherwise. The storm didn't affect Picher's main street, which looked like a ghost town anyways. Beyond that, some houses in the northern part of the city, as well as the school complex, remained undamaged. The disaster accelerated the exodus of the few remaining residents, though some felt that the buyout price was still not enough to start elsewhere. By 2009, most residents left Picher. Schools were closed, shops shuttered, and streets empty. What remained was a desolate landscape of abandoned buildings, collapsed mines, and piles of toxic waste. And so it was. Picher, a symbol of prosperity and progress, had become a monument to past mistakes. In 2009, Picher High School, known for its gorilla mascot, graduated its last class of 11 students. Finally, in November of 2013, after most residents accepted the government buyout, the city completely dissolved its charter. By 2014, only 10 people remained and observed the slow progress of cleanup, which involved removing piles of waste and attempting to restore Tar Creek, whose waters still ran red from heavy metal runoff. Among those living and working in the city was Gary Linderman, 59, who owned and operated the Picher Pharmacy on US Highway 69 for 16 years. He first came to Picher in 1975 when he worked as a student for the pharmacy's previous owner. There was also Jack Green, 91, who worked in the mines beneath the town from 1938 to 1941, before being drafted into the Army during World War II. He recalls how tremors from the mines would shake pencils off the desks in the high schools, recalling, quote, they let greed destroy this place, a remark made in reference to the practice of removing rock pillars that miners had originally left to support the cavernous spaces below the city. Karen Harvey, 53, lived in Picher from 1960 to 2002. As a child, she played on the waste piles and swam in the tailing ponds, which were both very dangerous activities. Recalling, quote, "We'd go swim in them, and our hair would turn orange and wouldn't wash out." Sadly, at the young age of 18, she underwent surgery to correct bone growth in her ears that interfered with her hearing, noting that she is also dyslexic and was recently diagnosed with an IQ of just 65. She began to wonder if her childhood in Picher contributed to these health problems, exclaiming, quote, "I don't know if that had something to do with it or not." She said, "I'm just figuring it out as I get older." The story of Picher, Oklahoma is a powerful reminder of how a thriving mining town can be transformed into a toxic ghost town. The residents who once filled its streets and houses lived what seemed to be a normal life for the time, working long hours in the mines and raising their families in an environment that looked safe. However, the hidden reality was that contamination of mining waste were sowing the seeds of their destruction. The fall of Picher is a lesson about the dangers of unchecked industry and a testament to the resilience of the people who once called it home. And with that, I thank you all for joining us. I really hope you'll support the channel by subscribing or joining our members area. Otherwise, until next time, this is Ryan Sokash signing off.